Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else in the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. And not only are we here, but we've also brought in Steven Boero from the sportscredential.com to discuss some Belmont basketball. Steven, how's everything going over there?
I'm doing well, Gus. How are you?
We're great, and it's just nice to have a conversation about the sport that we're all going to adore this season, and hopefully things, quote unquote, get a little bit back to normal, so we can enjoy it just the way that we hope we can. Steven, let's jump right into last season. Last season was special on multiple fronts for Belmont and their fans. Can you help the listeners recall a few elements that helped define last season for Coach Alexander and the Bruins?
I think just as a team overall, they were just so solid from the foundation that Coach Bird created with the recruits, and Coach Alexander bringing in some great recruits like Jacoby Wood to kind of build up this team that, I think a lot of people were expecting them to be good, but I don't think they expected them to be that good. And they're bringing back everyone from last year. Grayson Murphy, two-time defensive OVC Defensive Player of the Year. Nick Muszynski, OVC Tournament Player of the Year in 2020. Caleb Hollander, who had a great freshman year, kind of fell out sophomore year, but now last season looked fantastic. And they have a couple other really, really solid seniors and sophomores and juniors, and building off of last season with some of the ups and downs, a lot of ups, but this team is going to be one of the best teams in, I think, mid-major basketball.
I don't disagree with you there, Steven. I think I love the returning pieces, as you highlighted right there. I mean, they have two of the most important positions taken care of, and we'll get into them a little bit later. But let's reflect back upon one other thing from last season. Was there a specific hurdle that the Bruins and the program had to jump over due to the disjointness of C-19 last season? What were some of the things that the program had to negotiate?
Well, the biggest issue, I think, was the non-conference schedule.
Sure.
That's what really hurt their tournament resume, and that was because of COVID. They were set up to play in the ESPN Orlando Invitational over Thanksgiving, and that got completely canceled, so they couldn't play that. And that had some heavy hitters, I think, like Alabama, and I think a couple other Power 5 schools that even if Belmont held on and lost to, that would have definitely helped their resume. They played a separate tournament in DC where they played George Mason, Howard, which they're solid programs, but it doesn't really hold a lot for the tournament committee. And the OVC was on a down year for the most part. So them, crushing in OVC play helped a lot, but they lost 2 games towards the end of the season that definitely hurt. That they could have went undefeated in the OVC.
Right.
And then they lost the OVC tournament to Moorhead, who had a great year. And Moorhead is one of those teams that has kind of been a bottom feeder for quite a long time, where Belmont, Dylan Windler's biggest highlights for Belmont was on CBS Sports Network, just demolishing Moorhead State. And Moorhead State had a great year last year, and they beat Belmont in the OVC tournament against the NCAA tournament. So there's a little hiccups, but overall they were still such a great team. And I think coming into this season with all the seniors and knowing what worked and knowing what didn't work and trying to figure out the little holes here and there, what players need to step up, figuring things around that, I think they can, fix the issues last year. And obviously the non-conference schedule is arguably the best Belmont has ever had this season. And comparing to last season, that shouldn't be an issue, any type of resume questions around them getting into the tournament.
That's a great point, Steven, because one of the things that was lost for, a quote unquote mid-major like Belmont were those opportunities that existed in those preseason tournaments that were completely erased. And then that put even more pressure on that conference tournament. And, Johnny Broom had a day and Moorhead State got it done. And so then there's even more pressure on that tournament game, that championship game. I'm with you. You talked a little bit about the returners. We at the podcast have been a big fan of this core for a few seasons now. I know you have as well. They have the two most important positions, point guard and center, taken care of. They're in really talented hands. Just how special is this returning core this season? And maybe highlight some things that maybe the listener might need to pay attention to, like what they can do on the defensive end and how influential Nick Muszynski can be on the inside.
I think this Belmont team, you could argue, Belmont's had some great teams in the past, in OVC and the A-Sun. And even if you want to go back in the NAIA days, they ruled the NAIA. I think you could argue this is the best returning Belmont team on paper because they're bringing back Nick Muszynski, Grayson Murphy, Caleb Hollander, and a guy that I didn't expect to do too well is Luke Smith, who transferred in last year. Luke Smith started in all 30 games, played all 30 games, averaged 12.7 points per game, and was just an absolute killer behind the arc, shooting for 40%. But defensively, Belmont has really changed because of a player like Grayson Murphy and because of a coach like Casey Alexander. Belmont's one of those teams that would just destroy you on the 3-point, but they could give up a lot of points. And if the 3-ball wasn't dropping, like we've seen in the past with a couple of OVC tournaments, they would get themselves in a close game situation and they would sometimes lose. But with someone like Grayson Murphy, it's kind of hard to imagine them getting those situations again because of how he rules the court. He took over from Austin Luke, who was fantastic, one of the best point guards in Belmont history. And Grayson Murphy just overtook that role. There was no transition year. He is the captain of that core. Every time I talk to Coach Alexander, I'm like, how important is Grayson Murphy? I'm like, he's the most important player. He just owns it. 10.9 points per game, 8 rebounds. 63 steals. I mean, you don't see that from a guy his height. It's just really insane from what he's been able to do. 161 assists. He's just everywhere. Anytime you need something done, he's always going around, wrapping around the corner of a guy, stealing the ball, running up the court, going up for the layup. It's just constant energy and constant action from him. You're never going to see, or rarely will you see, a time where Grayson Murphy isn't doing something extremely important and doing something that will change the game defensively and offensively. He's just a captain.
It's a great point because there are very few players in the college game that are going to affect a game, like you mentioned, on both sides of the floor, offensively and defensively at the high level that Murphy can operate at, and he's shown that he can operate at. I bet he posts a triple-double this season. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all.
I could see him averaging a double-double, teetering on the triple-double because of the way he assists. And there are going to be some great players that he's going to be assisting to, and there are going to be some great players that are going to be assisting him. So it's just going to be such a collective helping team that everyone's offering someone else something. And I'm just really excited, especially Grayson Murphy. This is going to be his last year. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year in the OVC. Obviously, this is Belmont's last season in the OVC. So I think that Grayson Murphy's going to have a great season, especially with some of the weaker teams in the OVC. I think he's just going to run everyone down.
And then we also have to discuss the big man in the middle, Nick Muszynski.
Yeah.
I mean, he's special. He's skilled. He's just not a toss it into the post and let him do his thing. He can do a number of different things on the offensive and defensive end. Maybe break down his game a little bit.
Nick Muszynski is a huge guy, and he's got so much passion. And every year he's gotten better. He's, his training's gone up. He's lost some weight. He's gotten faster. He's not just like the stand in the post type of guy. I mean, if you look at his stats, 15 points per game, that's going to go up. 44 blocks on the team. I mean, that doesn't come anywhere close to anyone else. Only 6 steals, but that's okay. 5.6 rebounds per game. And, he's a devastating shooter. He shot 58% from the field last season. That's better than anyone else on the team, except for Grayson Murphy, who had 58.9%. So, I mean, that's the thing. You got those two guys that are so good at shooting and they're so good defensively. I mean, Nick Muszynski on the defensive side, blocking shots is just energy, just a booster. I mean, you hear the crowd at Belmont. Sometimes Belmont doesn't have a big crowd, but when they do get a big crowd, Nick Muszynski slapping that ball out is just huge. It's just such a energy booster, especially when you have guys that can rebound. He blocks that shot. The odds of Belmont getting that and then running it back up the court with Grayson Murphy leading with that speed, getting up a buck. I mean, there's nothing like it. It's just they're such a great pair together. I can't really think of another Belmont team that off the top of my head that had this great pair that could just do so much on the defensive end and turning into a couple quick points.
You mentioned like the pairing, and we can go around the nation, and I don't know if there's going to be many other, teams, mid-major, high major, power conference, whatever you're going to classify your team as, that has a point guard and a center that are going to influence the game like both of your players do. And speaking of players and some movement, Steven, catch us up on the transfer portal freshman situation. The transfer portal is like a roller coaster that never ends. So who are some of the new faces on the roster that are going to earn some of these rotation minutes and help some of the stars and the returners that we mentioned earlier?
Belmont didn't pick up any graduate transfers and any big transfers, but Luke Smith, who transferred in last year, is definitely a player that should be on people's radars if they didn't pay attention to Belmont too much last year. He's going to be a huge scorer. He's kind of the replacement for Adam Kunkel, who transferred last year to Xavier, who had a great sophomore year for Belmont. He's kind of taken over as the deadly three-point shooter for the Bruins. And they had two freshman pickups, Isaiah Walker from Wyoming and Will Richard from Georgia. Will Richard, I can't really see him not getting too much playing time. He's such a great player. He's 6'5", he's a guard, and for his school in Fairburn, Georgia, he averaged 24 points per game and 8.8 rebounds. He was second state in scoring per 32 minutes. He's just a scoring machine, and he's a guy that's really going to flourish in the Belmont program, especially under a coach like Coach Alexander, and with leaders like Nick Muszynski and Luke Smith and Grayson Murphy. And that's the thing about some of these young kids. They'll come in and, they may have had a good high school run, or they may have not had such a great high school run, but with leaders like Grayson Murphy and Luke Smith, Caleb Hollander, and these guys, they're going to flourish. They're going to learn so quick. That's why Nick Muszynski was able to do so well, because he was under the wings of Dylan Windler. And that's why Grayson Murphy was able to do so well, because he was under the wings of a Austin Luke. So they have two really solid freshmen coming in who really should flourish. They're both 6'5", they're both guards. And I think with guys like Grayson Murphy and even Jacoby Wood, I think them and Jacoby Wood will build a great relationship. Jacoby going in this sophomore year.
Well, it sounds like, and this is the story with a number of mid-majors and teams that like to get old and stay old. It's almost like you have some learning on the job, but you get to learn on the job from one of the experts. And sometimes these big programs just don't have that same returning veteran presence on the practice floor that is unbelievably valuable, during crunch time in a game. And we saw, you mentioned Kunkel. We saw how valuable he was for Xavier last year by hitting a game-winning shot and making some really crunch time plays. I think that goes to part of the schooling that he got with you guys over at Belmont. Now, Steven, you mentioned this previously, right? There's movement. There's musical chairs. The SEC, the Big 12 are not alone in the conference fluctuation that is going to continue to occur in our sport. Steven, what's the vibe on the huge news and the big move for Belmont changing up conferences, and maybe a few others might follow suit? So what's the feel and what's the outlook?
It's all positive. It's all excitement. The OVC has been a really solid conference for Belmont, but it's been one of those conferences where it would be Belmont and Murray, and maybe Austin Peay would have a good year. Maybe Jacksonville State would have a good year, and everyone else kind of dropped off. And if you look at last season, where so many teams weren't very good, and Belmont lost 2 games in conference play, but won 26 games overall. That hurt their resume. And I think that the athletic director, Scott Corley, I think Coach Alexander, and I think the program overall is saying, we have a tournament team every year, but how can we get in? And by being in a conference like the Missouri Valley, where they could have maybe 2 teams in the tournament every single year, always having competitive programs, from Illinois State to obviously Loyola, Missouri State, and these great teams, this is going to put them in a spot where it's going to force them to get better. They're not the big fish in a little pond like they were in the OVC, where they could kill everyone all the time and get those big numbers, those 26 wins. That might not happen, but they're going to be getting so much better by being surrounded by constantly competitive teams. So the feel is completely positive. Obviously, some people are like, it's a big step for Belmont, but this has been a long time coming. There's been so much talk over the last couple of years of Belmont possibly making a move to the Missouri Valley. A couple of years ago, they got invited by the Missouri Valley after they first joined the OVC, and they declined, which I think was the right choice. They need to kind of get their foothold in the OVC and make some noise there and grow their program there before they just kept jumping to other conferences. But this was the right move, especially after Jacksonville State and Eastern Kentucky last year left the OVC for the ASUN. This was the right move because the OVC is kind of shaky right now. No one knows what's going to happen. Austin Peay left for the ASUN. There were some rumors about Murray State. One Twitter account, I can't remember, said that Murray State was making the move to the MVC, but nothing has come to fruition just yet.
Well, it seems like, if nothing else for Belmont, the amount of in-conference opportunities for, however you want to call it, and we'll just refer to as a quad 1 win on your resume, I think that goes up exponentially with this move to the new conference. And I think it makes sense for them as a program to have it in line with, a traditional now, commonplace team like Loyola. And we've seen what kind of success they've had in the tournament over the past 5 or 6 years. So that only falls into line with what Belmont wants to accomplish as a program. And guess what? If they get into the tournament with maybe 22 wins as opposed to 27 wins, a couple more losses, but if they're able to, garner one of those at-large bids due to their conference alliance, I think it makes perfect sense. And you mentioned this, the non-conference schedule appears to be ripe for opportunity on paper. You mentioned that it looks not terrifying, but exciting. Steven, what game should Belmont fans circle with Sharpie during the non-conference schedule and really, really pay attention to and get locked into?
I think LSU is going to be a great one, and I think Drake is going to be a really fun one because it's the MVC team. That tournament over Thanksgiving, the ESPN Invitational Orlando. Belmont will play Drake, and they'll either play, if they win or lose, depending, they'll either play Alabama or Iona. So another 2 solid programs that Belmont could play. I think that is a tournament Belmont fans should really, really look at. And then down the line in early December, they have St. Louis. St. Louis has got such a great team this year. They're bringing back so many great players.
Perkins is back,
Oh, yeah. They played St. Louis 2 years ago in St. Louis, and they lost just closely because of Hassan French just, went to town on Belmont. But it was a close loss, and those are the teams Belmont should be looking to play. Those strong mid-major teams, A10, Missouri Valley. So this is a great precursor and taste for Belmont fans before they go into the Missouri Valley, playing Drake, playing Iona or Alabama, playing St. Louis. Those are the teams that Belmont wants to strive to be, those small private schools with fantastic basketball programs.
Absolutely. And a bunch of those teams minus St. Louis, and they of all programs last season faced the most obstacles COVID-wise. All of those are tournament teams. And all of those teams had, some level of success in their conference tournament and in March in the big tournament. So that makes sense, and the opportunity awaits for Bruin fans. All right, let's get you out of here on this one. Again, we're talking to Steven Boero. Please give him a follow over at SJBOERO97 on the Twitter machine. and you can follow his work over at the sportscredential.com for all things Belmont related. Steven, we'll get you out of here on this. It's prediction time. Are we looking at some of these non-conference wins being stacked up? Are we looking at another, 25 plus win season? What does the future hold for this particular Belmont squad with so many positive and veteran pieces returning?
I think that Belmont's going to have a very similar season to last year, but with the non-conference schedule being so good, I think they're going to pick up another 25 plus wins. I think they can beat Drake. I think they can take Furman. I think they can take Evansville. LSU's going to be a tough one. Alabama and Iona will obviously be tough. If they get to the final of the invitational tournament, they could play Kansas or Dayton or Miami. So those are big wins. If they could pick up a win or get a close loss, they can pick up a win against St. Louis. And if they can run the OVC, which I really think they can do. EKU, Jacksonville State being gone, it's really hurt the conference. Austin Peay's got an okay team. The best team in the OVC besides Belmont is probably Murray State with a couple of guys coming in. But other than that, Belmont is just exponentially older and more experienced and just better than most of the teams in the OVC. I could see them going undefeated in the OVC very easily. Maybe a loss to Murray, but I think Belmont is going to be a tournament team this year. And if they don't win the OVC tournament, they're going to get in that large bid. That's my prediction for how good this team is. It would be a crime for them not to let this team into the tournament.
I love the prediction, and I think Bruin fans out there also will applaud the prediction. I can hear a little clapping through the speakers right here, Steven. All right, listeners, thank you so much for letting us continue our team preview series. And Steven, thank you so much for shedding some light on what Belmont and that season might hold for them. Seems pretty promising with all the things you broke down for us. Again, please give Steven a follow over at the Sports Credential and give him a follow over on Twitter. Steven, thank you so much for a couple of minutes. It was really nice catching up, and hope you enjoy the season. Maybe we'll catch up later on this season.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gus. I'm just so excited. College basketball is going to be back in full swing, and really excited to see how the Bruins, take on this really tough non-conference schedule.
We echo that for sure. Cheers, cilantro, grazie, everybody. Arigato.